They say the hardest part of betrayal isn't the lie itself, but the way it retroactively poisons every memory you thought was safe. For 9 years, I lived in what I believed was a sanctuary of mutual respect and shared values. My wife, Esther, was the personification of Christian virtue. She wasn't just a believer. She was the kind of woman who made faith look effortless and attractive. I wasn't quite on her level. I grew up in the church, and while I never walked away, the fire had definitely settled into a low ember. But I loved that about her. I loved that her moral compass seemed bolted to the floor. I thought that even if the world went to hell, Esther would be standing right there, holding the line. It turns out that line wasn't just crossed, it was erased by a guy with a gym membership and a thirst for digital attention. This isn't a story about a loss of faith, though that's part of it. This is a story about the cold, hard reality of what happens when the person you trust most decides that their own ego is more important than a decade of shared history and 3 children. It started small. It always starts small. People think cheating is this explosive, cinematic event, but in reality, it's a series of tiny, quiet permissions. The first permission Esther gave herself was the lie about the car. I remember that day clearly because it was the first time I felt a genuine chill in my gut. I'd made it home before her, which was rare. When she finally pulled into the driveway, she looked flustered, her hair a bit more chaotic than usual. She told me the car had broken down. Now, we had just gotten that car serviced. It was a reliable SUV, specifically chosen to keep our 3 kids safe. When I asked her what happened, she was vague. She said it wouldn't start, then it suddenly did.
No call to me?
No text? I asked where it happened and she couldn't give me a street name, even though it was supposedly on her regular route home. It didn't add up, but I didn't want to be the guy who interrogated his wife like a criminal. I let it slide, but the seed was planted. Then came the phone incidents. You know the vibe, the way someone's body language shifts when you enter a room. She began putting her phone face down the second I walked in. One afternoon, she was on the couch with the kids, supposedly watching a cartoon, but she was buried in her screen. The moment she sensed me behind her, the phone was dropped like it was hot. She immediately started talking about getting new sprinklers for the lawn. We don't care about sprinklers. Our lawn was fine. It was such a bizarre, transparent diversion that even a child could have seen through it. I watched her adjust her seating position for the rest of the evening so that her back was always toward me. It was a tactical maneuver, not a comfortable one. That's when I knew. I didn't want to believe it, but the suspicion was a heavy weight in my chest that wouldn't lift. I decided to do something I'm not proud of, but something that was absolutely necessary. I waited until she was dead to the world, snoring softly beside me. I took her phone. My hands were shaking, not because I was afraid of her, but because I was afraid of what I would find. I started with the text nothing. Deleted, probably. Then I went to Instagram. That was her playground. And there he was. Brayden. His profile picture was exactly what you'd expect. A shirtless gym selfie designed to elicit exactly the kind of response Esther was giving him. I opened the DMs and my heart didn't just break. It felt like it was being squeezed by a cold hand. They had been talking for weeks. It was graphic, it was desperate, and it was entirely unlike the woman I had married. She was using language I'd never heard her use. She was flirting like a teenager who had just discovered romance novels. The most painful part wasn't even the flirtation. It was the realization that she was doing this while I was in the next room, while our kids were sleeping down the hall. She was building a secret life in the palm of her hand. I saw photos he had sent her, and I saw her responses, shameless, eager, and full of a validation-seeking hunger that I apparently couldn't satisfy. I took screenshots of everything. Every single message, every photo, every timestamp. It took hours because I wanted the record to be undeniable. I knew right then that the marriage was over. I couldn't unsee that. I couldn't go back to pretending she was the virtuous woman the church saw every Sunday. The next morning, I didn't say a word. I went to a lawyer. I needed someone who could look at the situation without emotion. My lawyer was a blunt, older guy who had seen it all. He told me that emotional affairs are often more damaging than physical ones because they involve a deliberate redirection of intimacy. He told me to be careful. He told me that she would likely try to paint me as the villain to save her own reputation. That's when I realized that this wasn't just going to be a divorce, it was going to be a battle for the truth. I arranged for my brother to take the kids for the day. I wanted the house quiet. I wanted there to be no distractions when I finally called her out. When we were alone, she was still acting like everything was normal. She was joking about having the house to ourselves. I just looked at her and asked for her phone. The color drained from her face instantly. She refused, citing privacy. I told her that privacy ends where secrets begin. I told her I already knew about Braden. She tried to deny it at first. She tried to say it was just a friend from the gym, just fun. But when I told her I had the screenshots, she crumbled. She didn't apologize, though. She got angry. She told me I had no right to go through her phone. She told me I was blowing it out of proportion because they hadn't actually done anything physically, as if the betrayal of the mind and heart was somehow less significant. She even had the nerve to say that her faith had nothing to do with it, as if she could compartmentalize her morality so easily. The divorce was messy. She tried to tell the court I was neglectful, that I had pushed her into the arms of another man. It was a classic move, but I had the evidence. Unfortunately, the system still favors the mother in many ways, and she ended up with the house. I moved into a modest apartment, and we began the grueling process of co-parenting while harboring a massive amount of resentment. But the one thing I couldn't stand was the way she continued to play the saint at her church. She was telling everyone that I had just changed or that we had grown apart. She was protecting her image while I was the one starting over from scratch. I decided I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. I waited for a Sunday when I had the kids. I dropped them off at her mother's place, and I drove to that church. I sat in the back, listening to the sermon about honesty and integrity, watching her sit in her usual pew, nodding along as if she were the gold standard of those virtues. When the service ended, I stood up. The room was quiet as people began to stand. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just spoke clearly. I told the congregation that the woman they admired had been carrying on an affair on Instagram for months. I told them that the reason our family was broken wasn't because I left, but because she chose a stranger's attention over her husband and children. I told them I had the proof if anyone cared to see it. The silence was deafening. I saw the looks on their faces, the shock, the judgment, the confusion. Esther looked like she wanted to disappear into the floorboards. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out, feeling a strange sense of peace. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it because the truth matters. I did it because she shouldn't get to hide behind a cross while she's trampling on the vows she made before it. Since then, her social circle has dwindled. The church community, for all its flaws, doesn't take kindly to that level of hypocrisy once it's out in the open. She hasn't confronted me about it, which tells me everything I need to know. She knows I'm right. She knows she traded a life for a moment of digital validation. My kids are adjusting. It's hard, and I hate that they have to live in two different worlds now, but they are learning that integrity is more important than appearances. I'm moving on bit by bit. I'm more cynical now, sure. I don't look at people the same way I used to, but I'm also more grounded. I know that a person's character isn't found in what they say on a Sunday morning, but in what they do when they think no one is watching. Esther thought she was safe because she was good at the performance. She forgot that eventually, the curtain always falls. And when it does, all you're left with is the truth you tried so hard to hide. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's the only way to actually start healing. I'm not looking for another perfect person anymore. I'm just looking for someone who is honest enough to be flawed. In the end, Braden was just a symptom of a much deeper rot. He wasn't the cause of the problem. He was just the guy Esther chose to help her burn it all down. She thinks she's a victim of my exposure, but she's really just a victim of her own choices. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I have to carry the weight of her secrets anymore. I'm free, and that is worth every bit of the struggle it took to get here. Looking back at the timeline, I can see how the architecture of our life was actually built on sand. We spent so much time curating the exterior that we forgot to check the foundation. Esther was so obsessed with being perceived as the perfect Christian wife that she lost touch with being a real partner. She wanted the status without the sacrifice. She wanted the community's applause while she was whispering to a stranger in the dark. It's a dangerous game to play, living two lives simultaneously. Eventually, the bridge between them collapses. I think about the kids a lot. My 7-year-old asked me why Mommy was crying so much after that Sunday. I didn't give him the gritty details, but I told him that sometimes adults make mistakes that have big consequences. I told him that telling the truth is always the right thing to do, even when it's hard. I want them to grow up knowing that their father isn't a liar. I want them to know that I stood up for our family, even when it meant breaking the illusion. The house is gone, the money is split, and the reputation is tarnished, but I still have my dignity. That's something Esther can't say. She's still trying to find herself in the comment section of some guy's profile, while I'm here, building something real. It's a long road ahead, but the air is a lot clearer now that the fog of her deception has lifted. You realize, after something like this, that the people who scream the loudest about their virtues are often the ones trying to drown out the sound of their own guilty conscience. I don't hate her. Hate takes too much energy. I just pity her. I pity the fact that she had everything, a loyal husband, beautiful children, a supportive community, and she threw it away for a dopamine hit on a smartphone. It's a modern tragedy, really. But it's my tragedy, and I'm going to own every chapter of it until the story finally changes for the better. The legal battles are mostly over now, though the echoes remain. Every time I pick up the kids from that house, the house I used to call home, I see the ghost of the life we had. I see the garden she used to tend to, the porch where we used to drink coffee, and I realize it was all a stage. She's still there, trying to maintain some semblance of her old life, but the cracks are too wide to ignore. The church members who used to invite us for dinner don't call anymore. Her parents, who once thought I was the luckiest man alive, now look at me with a mix of shame and anger. They want to blame me for publicly shaming her, but they can't look me in the eye when I ask them if they would have preferred I lived a lie. That's the thing about religious families sometimes. They value the appearance of peace over the existence of justice. They would rather I stayed quiet and let the cancer grow so that no one had to feel uncomfortable at the potluck. But I'm not built that way. I'd rather have a messy truth than a clean lie. My lawyer told me during one of our final sessions that most people in my position just walk away and let the other person keep their secrets. He said I was unique in my commitment to accountability. I don't know if that was a compliment or a warning, but it felt right. If we don't hold people accountable for the destruction they cause, we're basically giving them a license to do it again. I'm not interested in being a doormat for someone else's midlife crisis. I'm interested in reality. And reality is that Esther cheated. She lied. She manipulated. And now, she has to live with the person she actually is, not the person she pretended to be. It's a lonely place to be, I imagine. But it's a place she built for herself, brick by brick, DM by DM. As for Braden, I don't even think about him. He was just a tool. A shallow, unremarkable guy who provided a mirror for Esther's vanity. He didn't break my marriage, Esther did. He was just the guy holding the hammer. I hope he was worth it. I hope those filtered gym photos were worth the loss of a decade of devotion. I doubt they were. In the quiet moments of a night, when the kids are asleep and the apartment is still, I sometimes wonder if I could have done things differently. Could I have been more attentive? Could I have noticed the shift sooner? But then I remember the screenshots. I remember the enthusiasm in her words. I remember the calculated way she hit her screen. This wasn't a failure of my attention. It was a failure of her character. You can't love someone into being a good person if they've decided to be a selfish one. That's a hard lesson to learn, but it's one that saves you from a lifetime of self-blame. I'm 35 years old. I have half my life ahead of me. I'm going to spend it being honest. I'm going to spend it being the father my kids deserve. And I'm going to spend it far away from anyone who uses their faith as a shield for their infidelity. The altar of Instagram is a crowded place, but I've stepped down from it. I'm walking on solid ground now. It's a bit rocky, and it's a bit steep, but at least it's real. And in a world full of filters and facades, real is the only thing that matters. Every time I look at my kids, I see the reason why I had to do what I did. I couldn't let them grow up in a house where the air was thick with unspoken lies. I couldn't let them think that love is something you can just betray whenever you feel a little bored or unvalidated. I want them to know that their father stands for something. I want them to know that even when the whole world seems to be okay with small lies, those lies eventually grow into monsters that eat families. Esther still sends me texts occasionally, trying to gauge if I'm still angry. She words them in that typical church speak, talking about forgiveness and moving forward in grace. It's funny how people only want to talk about grace after they've been caught. Grace without accountability isn't grace. It's just an excuse. I don't respond to those messages. There's nothing left to say. The divorce decree is the final word. We are no longer a we. We are two separate people who happen to share DNA in three smaller people. That's the extent of it. I've started going back to a different church, one where no one knows my name or my story. It's refreshing. I sit in the pews and I listen, but I don't look for perfection anymore. I look for the people who are struggling, the people who are honest about their mess. That's where the actual faith is. Not in the polished Instagram feeds or the perfect Sunday outfits. It's in the brokenness. My life is broken, but it's being put back together in a way that's much stronger than before. I'm more careful about who I let into my circle. I'm more observant. I'm more cynical, yes, but I'm also more present. I don't take anything for granted. When someone tells me they are a good person, I wait to see it in their actions. I don't just take their word for it anymore. Esther taught me that lesson the hard way, and I'm not going to forget it. The public exposure at the church was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most liberating. It felt like I was finally exhaling after holding my breath for months. I knew people would judge me. I knew people would say I was being unchristian. But what is more unchristian than living a lie? What is more damaging to a community than a wolf in sheep's clothing? I didn't do it to destroy her. I did it to save myself from the lies she was forcing me to live. And if her reputation was destroyed in the process, that's just the natural consequence of her own actions. You can't set a fire and then get mad when the smoke ruins your clothes. I'm looking forward to the future now. It's not the future I planned, but it's a future that is entirely mine. I'm not defined by Esther's betrayal. I'm defined by how I handled it. I'm defined by the fact that I didn't let her gaslight me into believing I was the problem. I'm defined by the fact that I put the truth above the performance. And that is a foundation I can actually build on. For anyone else going through this, just know that the truth is your only weapon. Don't let them make you feel crazy. Don't let them use their good reputation to silence you. The digital world has made it easier than ever to cheat, but it also leaves a trail. Follow that trail, document it, and then walk away with your head held high. You deserve someone who doesn't need 1,000 strangers to tell them they're special. You deserve someone who knows that the most important audience they'll ever have is the person sitting right across from them at the dinner table. Esther lost that. She traded the love of a lifetime for a like on a photo. It's a bad trade, and she knows it. Every time she sees me, I see that realization in her eyes. And as much as it hurts, I know that this is exactly how it had to end. The truth doesn't just set you free, it clears the room. And now that the room is empty, I can finally start to fill it with something that's actually built to last. It's been a few months since the church incident, and the dust is finally starting to settle. My oldest son had a birthday recently. We had 2 separate parties. It was awkward, but it was necessary. At my party, the house was full of people who actually care about me, friends who stood by me through the mess, my brother, and even a few people from the old church who reached out after they realized the truth. It was a celebration of him, but it also felt like a celebration of a new beginning. I looked at my kids, and I realized they're going to be okay. They have a father who is present, who is honest, and who loves them more than anything. They see me working hard to build this new life, and I think they respect that. They're smart. They can sense when someone is being real with them. Esther's party was, from what I heard, a much smaller affair. Most of her friends were the kind of people who disappear when things get complicated. That's the thing about a community built on appearances. When the appearance breaks, the community vanishes. She's learning that the hard way. I don't take pleasure in her loneliness, but I do find a certain justice in it. You can't treat people like they're disposable and then expect them to be there for you when you're down. I've started to find my own rhythm. I cook for the kids, I help with homework, and I've even started a hobby I haven't touched in years, restoring old furniture. There's something therapeutic about taking something that's been neglected and broken and making it useful again. It takes time, and it takes effort, and you have to sand away a lot of the old, ugly layers to get to the good wood underneath. It's a lot like my life right now. I'm sanding away the years of lies and the layers of betrayal to find out who I actually am without Esther. It turns out I'm a pretty good guy. I'm a resilient guy. I'm a guy who values the truth above all else. And that's a guy I'm proud to be. I don't know if I'll ever get married again. Right now, the idea seems exhausting. But I do know that if I ever do let someone into my life again, they're going to have to be the kind of person who doesn't need a screen to feel seen. They're going to have to be someone who understands that loyalty isn't just a word you say in a ceremony. It's a choice you make every single day. Until then, I'm content. I have my kids, I have my integrity, and I have the truth. And in the end, that's more than Esther can say. She's still chasing shadows, while I'm standing in the light. It's a long journey, and the scars will always be there, but the wound is finally closed. And that is enough for me. Looking back on the whole experience, I've realized that the digital world acts like a magnifying glass for character flaws. It doesn't make people cheat. It just makes it easier for them to indulge the selfishness they already had inside. Esther's phone didn't change her. It just revealed her. And while the exposure was painful, it was the only way to stop the rot from spreading further into our lives. I can sleep at night now, knowing that I didn't participate in the lie. I didn't protect a predator of my peace. I stood up and said no more. And that is a victory in itself. My life isn't perfect, and it's certainly not what I expected it to be at this age. But it's mine. It's authentic. And every day I wake up, I'm grateful for the clarity that the truth brought into my world. The altar of Instagram has a lot of worshipers, but I've found a better way to live. I've found that the most important connections aren't the ones you make with strangers online, but the ones you cultivate with the people who are actually there for you when the lights go out. Esther chose the strangers. I chose my family. And even though it cost me almost everything, I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. The truth is heavy, but it's the only thing worth carrying. And as I move forward, I'm carrying it with pride. My journey hasn't been easy, and the path ahead is still uncertain, but I'm walking it with my eyes wide open. And that, more than anything else, is what it means to be truly free. I've learned that accountability isn't just a punishment for the wrongdoer, it's a gift for the wronged. It validates your reality. It tells the world that what you went through is real, and that it mattered. For a long time, Esther made me feel like I was the crazy one, like I was the one with the problem. But the truth silenced that voice. It gave me my voice back. And I'm going to keep using it to tell my story, not because I want to hurt her, but because I want to help anyone else who is trapped in a house of mirrors. Don't be afraid to break the glass. It's going to be messy, and you might get cut, but it's the only way to get out. Once you're outside, you'll realize the air is so much sweeter than you remembered. And you'll realize that you were never the one who was broken. You were just the one who was brave enough to see the cracks. I'm a different man today than I was a year ago. I'm stronger, I'm wiser, and I'm much more honest with myself. I don't need the validation of a church congregation or a social media feed to know my worth. I know it because I've been through the fire, and I came out on the other side. My kids see that strength, and I hope one day they'll understand why their father had to be the one to tell the truth. I hope they'll understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stop a lie from continuing. And I hope they'll always choose the truth, no matter how much it costs. Because in the end, the truth is the only thing that actually stays with you. Everything else, the house, the reputation, the perfect life, can be taken away in an instant. But the truth is yours forever. And that is a treasure worth more than anything else in this world. My story isn't a happy one in the traditional sense, but it is a successful one because it ended in reality. And reality is always better than a beautiful lie. I'm moving forward, one step at a time, and I'm not looking back. The view from here is much better, and the horizon is finally clear. I'm done with the performance. I'm done with the facades. I'm just me, and for the first time in my life, that's enough. I don't need a shirtless guy on Instagram or a nodding congregation to tell me I'm okay. I know I'm okay because I'm living the truth. And there is no greater peace than that. As I reflect on everything, I realize that Esther's greatest mistake wasn't the cheating itself, though that was devastating. Her greatest mistake was thinking that she could live a life of hypocrisy without it eventually catching up to her. She thought she was smarter than the truth. She thought she could manipulate everyone's perception of her forever. But the truth is like water. It eventually finds its way through the smallest cracks. And when it does, it can wash away even the most carefully constructed life. I'm glad I was the one to pull the plug. I'm glad I didn't wait for the rot to consume our kids' childhoods entirely. I'm glad I stood up for what was right, even when it was incredibly difficult. My life is different now, but it's better. It's honest. And that's all I ever wanted. I'm not the victim of this story anymore. I'm the hero of it, because I had the courage to face the truth and the strength to live with the consequences. And as I continue to build my new life, I'm doing it with the knowledge that the best is yet to come. Not because life is easy, but because I am real. And real is all I ever need to be.